Postage stamp may also refer to a formatting artifact in the display of film or video. Window box. A postage stamp is a small piece of paper that is purchased and displayed on an item of mail as evidence of payment of postage. Typically, stamps are printed on special custom-made paper, show a national designation and a denomination on the front, and have an adhesive gum on the back or a self-adhesive. Postage stamps are purchased from a postal administration or other authorized vendor, and are used to pay for the costs involved in moving mail, as well as other business necessities such as insurance and registration. They are sometimes a source of net profit to the issuing agency, especially when sold to collectors who will not actually use them for postage. Stamps are usually rectangular, but triangles or other shapes are occasionally used. The stamp is affixed to an envelope or other postal cover the customer wishes to send. The item is then processed by the postal system, where a postmark, sometimes known as a cancellation mark, is usually applied in overlapping manner to stamp and cover. This procedure marks the stamp as used to prevent its reuse. In modern usage, postmarks generally indicate the date and point of origin of the mailing. The mailed item is then delivered to the address the customer has applied to the envelope or parcel. Postage stamps have facilitated the delivery of mail since the 1840s. Before then, ink and hand stamps, usually made from wood or cork, were often used to frank the mail and confirm the payment of postage. The first adhesive postage stamp, commonly referred to as the penny black, was issued in the United Kingdom in 1840. The invention of the stamp was a part of an attempt to reform and improve the postal system in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, which, in the early 19th century, was in disarray and rife with corruption. There are varying accounts of the inventor or inventors of the stamp. Before the introduction of postage stamps, mail in the UK was paid for by the recipient, a system that was associated with an irresolvable problem. The costs of delivering mail were not recoverable by the postal service when recipients were unable or unwilling to pay for delivered items, and senders had no incentive to restrict the number, size, or weight of items sent, whether or not they would ultimately be paid for. The postage stamp resolved this issue in a simple and elegant manner, with the additional benefit of room for an element of beauty to be introduced. Concurrently with the first stamps, the UK offered wrappers for mail. Later related inventions include postal stationery such as prepaid postage envelopes, postcards, lettercards, aerograms, postage meters, and, more recently, specialty boxes and envelopes provided free to the customer by the U.S. Postal Service for priority or express mailing. The postage stamp afforded convenience for both the mailer and postal officials, more effectively recovered costs for the postal service, and ultimately resulted in a better, faster postal system. With the conveniences stamps offered, their use resulted in greatly increased mailings during the 19th and 20th centuries. Postage stamps during this era were the most popular way of paying for mail, however, by the end of the 20th century were rapidly being eclipsed by the use of metered postage and bulk mailing by businesses. As postage stamps with their engraved imagery began to appear on a widespread basis, historians and collectors began to take notice. The study of postage stamps and their use is referred to as philately. Stamp collecting can be both a hobby and a form of historical study and reference, as government-issued postage stamps and the mailing systems have always been involved with the history of nations. Invention. Throughout modern history, numerous innovations were used to apply or indicate that postage has been paid on a mailed item. Hence the invention of the postage stamp has been accredited to several different people. William Dockwra in 1680. William Dockwra, an English merchant in London, and his partner Robert Murray established the London penny post, a mail system that delivered letters and small parcels inside the City of London for the sum of 1 penny. The postage for the mailed item was prepaid by the use of a hand stamp to frank the mailed item, confirming payment of postage. Though this stamp was applied to a letter instead of a separate piece of paper, it is considered by many historians as the world's first postage stamp. Lovinc Kozier. In 1835, the Slovene civil servant Lovinc Kozier from Ljubljana in Austria-Hungary suggested the use of artificially affixed postal tax stamps using pressed papieroblate, which translates as pressed paper wafers, but although the suggestion was looked at in detail, it was not adopted. Rowland Hill. The Englishman Sir Rowland Hill began interest in postal reform in 1835. In 1836, a Member of Parliament, Robert Wallace, provided Hill with numerous books and documents, which Hill described as a half-hundredweight of material. Hill commenced a detailed study of these documents, leading him to the 1837 publication of a pamphlet entitled Post Office Reform: Its Importance and Practicability. He submitted a copy of this to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Thomas Spring Rice, on 4 January 1837. This first edition was marked private and confidential, and was not released to the general public. The Chancellor summoned Hill to a meeting during which the Chancellor suggested improvements and changes to be presented in a supplement, which Hill duly produced and supplied on 28 January 1837. Rowland Hill then received a summons to give evidence before the Commission for Post Office Inquiry on 13 February 1837. During his evidence, he read from the letter he wrote to the Chancellor, including a statement the notation of paid postage could be created by using a bit of paper just large enough to bear the stamp, and covered at the back with a glutinous wash. This is the first publication of an unambiguous description of a modern adhesive postage stamp. Shortly afterward, the second edition of Hill's booklet, dated the 22nd of February 1837, was published, and made available to the general public. This booklet, containing some 28,000 words, incorporated the supplement given to the Chancellor, and statements he made to the Commission. Hansard records that on 15 December 1837, Benjamin Hawes inquired to the Chancellor of the Exchequer whether it was the intention of the government to give effect to the recommendation of the Commissioners of the Post Office, contained in their 9th report relating to the reduction of the rates of postage and the issuing of penny stamps. Hill's ideas for postage stamps and charging paid postage based upon weight soon took hold, and were adopted in many countries throughout the world, with the new policy of charging by weight. Using envelopes for mailing documents became the norm. Hill's brother Edwin Hill invented a prototype envelope-making machine that folded paper into envelopes quickly enough to match the pace of the growing demand for postage stamps. Rowland Hill and the postal reforms he introduced to the UK postal system are commemorated on several commemorative postage issues of the United Kingdom. James Chalmers. Scotsman Patrick Chalmers asserted the claim that his father, James Chalmers, was the inventor of the first postage stamp in the 1881 publication, The Penny Postage Scheme of 1837. In this book, The Sun claims James Chalmers first produced an essay describing and advocating a stamp in August 1834. However, no evidence for this is provided in the book. Until his death in 1891, Patrick Chalmers campaigned to gain recognition for his father as the inventor of the postage stamp. The first independent evidence for Chalmers' claim is the essay and proposal he submitted for adhesive postage stamps to the General Post Office, dated 8 February 1838 and received by the Post Office on 17 February 1838. In this approximately 800-word document concerning methods of indication letters postage paid, he states, therefore, of Mr. Hill's plan of a uniform rate of postage, I conceive that the most simple and economical mode would be by slips. In the hope that Mr. Hill's plan may soon be carried into operation, I would suggest that sheets of stamp slips should be prepared, then be rubbed over on the back with a strong solution of gum. Chalmers' original document is now in the UK's National Postal Museum. given the postage denominations stated in James Chalmers' essay mirrored those proposed by Rowland Hill in February 1837. It is clear Chalmers was aware of Hill's proposals. It is unknown whether Chalmers obtained a copy of Hill's booklet, or simply read about it in the Times newspaper that on two occasions, the 25th of March 1837, the 20th of December 1837, reported in great detail Hill's proposals. Neither of Hill's articles mention a bit of paper just large enough to bear the stamp, hence available information at the time via the Times article could not have made Chalmers aware Hill previously made such a proposal. This suggests either Chalmers previously read Hill's booklet and was merely expounding on Hill's idea, or he concurrently and independently developed the idea of the modern postage stamp. James Chalmers organized petitions for a low and uniform rate of postage. The first such petition was presented in the House of Commons on 4 December 1837. Further petitions organized by him were presented on 1 May 1838, 14 May 1838, and 12 June 1839. In this period of time, other groups organized petitions and presented them to Parliament. All petitions for consumer-oriented, low-cost, volume-based postal rates following the disclosure of Hill's proposals. Other claimants include or have included Dr. John Gray of the British Museum, Samuel Forrester, a Scottish tax official, Charles Whiting, a London stationer, Samuel Roberts of Clanbrynmere, Wales, Francis Worrell Stevens, schoolmaster at Loughton, Ferdinand E. Garter of Spittal, Austria, Curry Gabriel Treffenberg from Sweden. History. Although a number of people laid claim to the concept of the postage stamp, it is well documented that stamps were first introduced in the United Kingdom on 1 May 1840 as a part of postal reforms promoted by Sir Rowland Hill. With its introduction, the postage fee was then to be paid by the sender and not the recipient, though it was still possible to send mail without prepaying. Postmarks have been applied over stamps, obliterating them from further usage, since the first postage stamps came into use. The first stamp, the penny black, became available for purchase 1 May 1840, to be valid as of 6 May 1840. 2 days later, the 8th of May 1840, the 2p blue was introduced. Both stamps exhibit an engraving of the young Queen Victoria, neither bearing perforations, as the first stamps were separated from their sheets by cutting mechanisms. At the time of issuance, given no need for indication of origin, no country name was included on the postage stamps. The UK remains the only country to omit itself by name on postal stamps, using the reigning monarch's head as implicit identification. Following the introduction of the postage stamp in the UK, the use of this prepaid postage innovation drastically accelerated the number of postal sent. Prior to 1839, the number of letters sent was 76 million. By 1850, this volume increased fivefold to 350 million, continuing to grow rapidly thereafter, until the end of the 20th century when newer methods of indicating postage paid drastically reduced the use of delivery systems requiring stamps. Other countries soon followed in example, the United Kingdom with their own stamps. The Canton of Zurich in Switzerland issued the Zurich 4 and 6 Rappen on 1 March 1843. Although the penny black could be used to send a letter less than half an ounce anywhere within the United Kingdom, the Swiss did not initially adopt that system, instead continuing to calculate mail rates based on distance to be delivered. Brazil issued the Bullseye Stamp on 1 August 1843. Using the same printer as for the penny black, Brazil opted for an abstract design instead of portrait of Emperor Pedro II, so his image would not be disfigured by a postmark. In 1845, some postmasters in the United States issued their own stamps, but it was not until 1847 that the first official U.S. stamps were created. 5 and 10-cent issues depicting Benjamin Franklin and George Washington. A few other countries issued stamps in the late 1840s. Many others, such as India, initiated their use in the 1850s, and by the 1860s most countries issued stamps. Perforation of postage stamps began January 1854. The first officially perforated stamps were issued in February 1854. Stamps from Henry Archer's perforation trials were issued the last few months of 1850, during the 1851 parliamentary session at the House of Commons, and finally in 1853/54 after the government paid Mr. Archer £4,000 for his machine and the patent design. When the first postage stamps were issued in the 1840s, they followed an almost identical standard in shape, size and general subject matter. They were rectangular in shape. They bore the images of queens, presidents and other political figures. They also depicted the denomination of the postage paid, and with the exception of the United Kingdom, depicted the name of the country from which issued. Nearly all early postage stamps depict images of national leaders only. Soon after the introduction of the postage stamp, other subjects and designs began to appear. Some designs were welcome, others widely criticized. For example, in 1869, the U.S. Post Office broke tradition of depicting presidents or other famous historical figures, instead using other subjects including a train and horse. The change was greeted with general disapproval, and sometimes harsh criticism from the American public. Perforations are small holes made between individual postage stamps on a sheet of stamps, facilitating separation of a desired number of stamps. The resulting frame-like, rippled edge surrounding the separated stamp defines a characteristic mean for the appearance of a postage stamp. In the first decade of postage stamps' existence, stamps were issued without perforations. Scissors or other cutting mechanisms were required to separate a desired number of stamps from a full sheet. If cutting tools were not used, individual stamps were torn off. This is evidenced by the ragged edges of surviving examples. Mechanically separating stamps from a sheet proved an inconvenience for postal clerks and businesses, both dealing with large numbers of individual stamps on a daily basis. By 1850, methods such as rouletting wheels were being devised in efforts of making stamp separation more convenient, and less time-consuming. The United Kingdom was the first country to issue postage stamps with perforations. The first machine specifically designed to perforate sheets of postage stamps was invented in London by Henry Archer, an Irish landowner and railroad man from Dublin, Ireland. The 1850 penny red was the first stamp to be perforated during trial course of Archer's perforating machine. After a period of trial and error and modifications of Archer's invention, new machines based on the principles pioneered by Archer were purchased, and in 1854 the UK postal authorities started continuously issuing perforated postage stamps in the penny red and all subsequent designs. The United States government and the Post Office were quick to follow the lead of the UK. In the US, the use of postage stamps caught on quickly and became more widespread when on March 3, 1851, the last day of its legislative session, Congress passed the Act of March 3, 1851. Similarly introduced on the last day of the congressional session 4 years later, the Act of March 3, 1855 required the prepayment of postage on all mailings. Thereafter, postage stamp use in the U.S. quickly doubled, and by 1861 had quadrupled. In 1856, under the direction of Postmaster General James Campbell, Toppin and Carpenter purchased a rotary machine designed to separate stamps. Patented in England in 1854 by William and Henry Bemrose, who were printers in Derby, England. The original machine cut slits into the paper rather than punching holes, but the machine was soon modified. The first stamp issue to be officially perforated, the 3-cent George Washington, was issued by the U.S. Post Office on February 24, 1857. Between 1857 and 1861, all stamps originally issued between 1851 to 1856 were reissued with perforations. Initial capacity was insufficient to perforate all stamps printed. Thus perforated issues used between February and July 1857 are scarce and quite valuable. Shapes and materials. In addition to the most common rectangular shape, stamps have been issued in geometric and irregular shapes. The United States issued its first circular stamp in 2000 as a hologram of the Earth. Sierra Leone and Tonga have issued stamps in the shapes of fruit. Stamps that are printed on sheets are generally separated by perforations, though, more recently, with the advent of gummed stamps that do not have to be moistened prior to affixing them, designs can incorporate smooth edges. Stamps are most commonly made from paper designed specifically for them, and are printed in sheets, rolls, or small booklets. Less commonly, postage stamps are made of materials other than paper, such as embossed foil. Switzerland made a stamp that contained a bit of lace and one of wood. The United States produced one of plastic. East Germany issued a stamp of synthetic chemicals. In the Netherlands, a stamp was made of silver foil. Bhutan issued one with its national anthem on a playable record. Graphic characteristics. The subjects found on the face of postage stamps are generally what defines a particular stamp issue to the public and are often a reason why they are saved by collectors or history enthusiasts. Graphical subjects found on postage stamps have ranged from the early portrayals of kings, queens and presidents to later depictions of ships, birds and satellites, famous people, historical events, comics, dinosaurs, hobbies, sports, holiday themes, and a wealth of other subjects too numerous to list. Artists, designers, engravers and administrative officials are involved with the choice of subject matter and the method of printing stamps. Early stamp images were almost always produced from engravings, a design etched into a steel die, which was then hardened and whose impression was transferred to a printing plate. Using an engraved image was deemed the more secure way of printing stamps, as it was nearly impossible to counterfeit a finely detailed image with raised lines unless you were a master engraver. In the mid-20th century, stamp issues produced by other forms of printing began to emerge, such as lithography, photogravure, intaglio and web offset printing. These later printing methods were less expensive and typically produced images of lesser quality.